One accidental message, one grieving billionaire, one scared expecting mother. When Amaya texts her pain to a stranger, she doesn't expect him to show up, let alone change everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the poi. World you're watching from today? Raya Thompson's feet ached as she pushed her shopping cart down the cereal aisle of Save Mart. After an 8-hour shift at the diner and 3 hours cleaning offices, all she wanted was to get home, tuck Zion into bed and collapse on the couch. But empty cupboards wouldn't fill themselves. "Mama, can we get the one with the prize?" Zion asked, pointing at a brightly colored box of sugar-loaded cereal. "Not today, baby. We need to stick to our list." Raya compared 2 store-brand cereals, calculating which one gave more for the money. Every penny mattered, especially with the letter she'd received yesterday. Rent was going up again. Zion's attention drifted as 5-year-old's attention often does. He spotted a tall man in a navy coat at the end of the aisle, studying nutrition labels with intense concentration. Something in the man's stance, the broadness of his shoulders, or maybe just the wishful thinking of a child who'd never known. His father made Zion's face light up. Before Raya could stop him, he darted away. "Zion, come back here," she called. But he was already halfway down the aisle, running straight toward the stranger. The man looked up just as Zion wrapped his small arms around his leg, holding tight. "I missed you, Daddy," Zion said, his voice filled with innocent certainty. Raya froze, mortified. She rushed toward them, apologies already forming on her lips. But what happened next stopped her in her tracks. The tall stranger, with his expensive coat and polished shoes, didn't pull away. Instead, he knelt down to Zion's level, his face softening in a way that transformed his serious features. He gently returned the hug, closing his eyes for just a moment. In that brief second, Raya saw something raw and honest cross the man's face, a flash of need so profound it made her breath catch. "I'm so sorry," Raya said when she reached them, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Zion, honey, this isn't—" She reached for her son's hand. "It's all right," the man said, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle. "That might have been the kindest thing that's happened to me in months." He stood up, and Raya realized just how tall he was, at least 6'2", with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold more stories than they told. "I'm Julian," he said, extending his hand. Julian Rhodes. The name struck a chord of recognition, but Raya couldn't place it. She shook his hand, noting the contrast between her calloused palm and his smooth one. "Raya Thompson. And this is Zion." She pulled her son, closer, protective instinct kicking in. "We should let you finish your shopping. Again, I'm really sorry about that." Julian's eyes lingered on Zion, who was now hiding behind his mother's legs but peeking out with curious eyes. "Would it be strange," Julian said slowly, as if testing each word before letting it go, "if I asked for a hug too?" The question hung in the air between them. Raya stared at him, this powerful, perfectly dressed man in the middle of a grocery store, and saw it clearly. Loneliness. A grief so familiar, she recognized it like her own reflection. I don't usually hug strangers," she said, but there was no edge to her words. Julian nodded, a small sad smile touching his lips. "Of course, that was inappropriate. Please forget I asked." He started to turn away, but Zion tugged at Raya's hand. "Mama, he looks sad," Zion whispered, not quite quietly enough. Julian paused, then faced them again. "Smart kid you've got there." "Too smart sometimes," Raya said, feeling something shift in the air between them. "Listen, Mr. Rhodes. Julian, please. Julian, I don't know what you're going through, but whatever it is, I hope it gets better." He nodded, looking at her with an intensity that made her want to step back and move closer all at once. "Thank you, Raya." The way he said her name, careful, like something that might break if handled roughly, stayed with her long after he walked away. A week later, Raya was balancing a tray of coffee orders when the bell above the diner door jingled. She glanced up and nearly dropped the tray. Julian Rhodes stood in the entrance, looking somehow both out of place and perfectly at ease in his tailored suit. His eyes scanned the room until they found hers. "Table for one?" asked Dottie, the 60-something hostess. "Yes, thank you," Julian replied, but his eyes never left Raya's face. Dottie seated him in Raya's section. Of course she did. Raya delivered her coffee orders, took a deep breath and approached his table. "This is a surprise," she said, placing a menu in front of him. "Is it?" Julian asked. "I had breakfast at home this morning and realized I didn't know how other people start their day. Then I remembered you mentioned working at a diner." Raya raised an eyebrow. "I didn't tell you where." A hint of color touched his cheeks. "No, I didn't. I might have looked up diners in this area. This is the third one I've tried." The admission was so unexpected, this powerful man going from diner to diner looking for her, that Raya almost laughed. "You could have just waited at the grocery store. We go every Thursday." Julian's eyes brightened. "Thursday, I'll remember that." The simple happiness in his expression made something flutter in Raya's chest. She pushed the feeling away. Men like Julian Rhodes didn't belong in her world. "What can I get you?" she asked, all business now. "What do you recommend?" "The pancake special is popular." "Then that's what I'll have." He handed back the menu without opening it. As Raya walked away, she felt his eyes on her back. She told herself the warmth spreading through her was just from the heat of the kitchen. On Thursday, Zion spotted him first. "Mama, look, it's the man I hugged." Raya looked up from comparing prices to see Julian standing by the cereal just like the week before. This time, though, he wasn't pretending to shop. He was waiting, a nervous energy about him that seemed at odds with his confident stance. Zion ran to him before Raya could stop him. This time, Julian was ready, kneeling down to receive the boys. Enthusiastic embrace. "Hello again," Julian said when Raya approached. "I hope this isn't too forward." "It's a public place," Raya replied, but she couldn't help smiling. Though most people don't schedule their grocery shopping around the chance of running into strangers. "Not strangers," Julian corrected gently. "Friends, maybe." The hope in his voice was so genuine that Raya found herself nodding. "Maybe." Julian's whole face lit up, and for a moment Raya glimpsed what he might have looked like as a boy, before life had taught him to guard his expressions. "Can I buy you both ice cream?" he asked. "There's a shop next door." Raya hesitated. "I still need to finish shopping." "After then?" She should say no. Men with money always wanted something. But Zion was looking up at her with pleading eyes, and if she was honest, she was curious about Julian Rhodes. "Okay," she agreed. "After shopping." The ice cream shop was small and cheerful, with checkered floors and red vinyl booths. Julian looked comically out of place in his expensive clothes, but he didn't seem to notice or care. Zion got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Raya chose vanilla. Julian asked for butter pecan, which made Raya smile. "What?" he asked, catching her expression. "Butter pecan. That's what my grandfather always ordered. Said it was an old man's flavor." Julian laughed, a real laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Should I be offended?" "No," Raya said, surprised by how much she liked the sound of his laughter. "It's nice, reminds me of someone good." They settled into a booth, Zion between them, happily attacking his ice cream. "So," Julian said, "tell me about yourselves." Raya gave him the simple version. Single mum, 2 jobs, apartment in Millwood Heights. "Millwood Heights," Julian repeated, something flashing across his face too quickly for Raya to read. "That's, nice." "It's what we can afford," Raya said, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "For now, anyway." Julian nodded quickly. "Of course, I didn't mean—" He stopped, gathering his thoughts. "What's your favorite childhood memory?" The abrupt change of subject threw Raya off balance. "What?" "I'm trying to get to know you," Julian explained. "Not the practical details, but the real you." Raya studied him, trying to understand what this man, who she was now certain was someone important, wanted from her. "Making sweet potato pie with my grandmother," she finally said. "She'd let me lick the spoon if I promised not to tell anyone she added an extra shot of bourbon to the filling." Julian smiled, leaning forward. "Did you keep her secret?" "Until now," Raya said, and they both laughed. "What about you?" she asked. "Favorite childhood memory?" A shadow crossed Julian's face. "Building a treehouse with my sister. We were going to live there forever, just the 2 of us, make our own rules." "What happened to that plan?" Julian's eyes grew distant. "She died when we were young. Leukemia." I'm sorry, Raya said, reaching across the table without thinking. Her hand covered his. Julian looked at their hands, then at her face. It was a long time ago, but the pain in his voice suggested otherwise. Zion, sensing the change in mood, patted Julian's arm with a sticky hand. Don't be sad. Mama says it's okay to miss people. Julian's eyes filled with something Raya couldn't name. Your mama is right, he said softly. When they parted ways outside the shop, Julian hesitated. Will I see you next Thursday? The question felt like more than just a casual inquiry. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had planned. We'll be getting groceries, Raya said. Same time. Julian nodded, relief evident in his smile. Then I'll be there. As Raya watched him walk away, Zion tugged at her hand. I like Mr. Julian, he said simply. He makes the air feel quiet. Raya looked down at her son, wondering how someone so small could sometimes be so wise. Yeah, she agreed softly. He does. But as they headed for the bus stop, a nagging worry settled in her chest. Men like Julian Rhodes didn't just appear in the lives of women like her without a reason. The question was, what did he really want, and why did part of her hope he wanted her? The next few Thursdays fell into a pattern. Raya and Zion would shop, Julian would appear by the cereal, and they'd spend time together afterward. Sometimes ice cream, sometimes the small park across the street. Raya told herself it was for Zion's sake. The boy lit up whenever Julian appeared, and good male role models were hard to come by. But she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach each time Julian smiled at her. 3 weeks into their Thursday meetings, Raya arrived at the grocery store, looking tired and drawn. Julian noticed immediately. Bad day? He asked as they walked the aisles, Zion riding in the cart. Bad week, Raya admitted. The rent increase notice came. They're raising it by $300 next month. Julian frowned. That's a significant jump. Is that even legal? Legal enough, I guess. The building changed ownership last year. New companies been making improvements to justify the increases. She made air quotes around the word. Fresh. Paint in the hallways, new mailboxes, nothing that actually makes our lives better. Which company? Julian asked, his voice oddly tight. Raya shrugged. Some corporate name. Rhodes something, I think. Julian stopped walking, his face suddenly pale. Rhodes Enterprises? He asked quietly. That sounds right. Raya looked at him, confused by his reaction. Why? Do you know them? Julian's expression closed off. I've heard of them. They have a reputation. Something in his tone made Raya uneasy. A bad one, I'm guessing. Mixed, Julian said carefully. Look, I know some people. Maybe I can help with your situation. Raya's pride flared. I don't need charity, Julian. Not charity, he said quickly. Just information. Options. Raya studied him, sensing there was something he wasn't saying. But before she could press further, Zion dropped his toy car and the moment passed. That night, after putting Zion to bed, Raya decided to look up Rhodes Enterprises. She hadn't paid much attention when the building changed hands. One faceless corporation was the same as another to her. What she found made her stomach drop. Rhodes Enterprises was one of the largest real estate development companies in the state. And there, on the website's leadership page, was Julian's face. Julian Rhodes, CEO and majority owner. Raya stared at the screen, betrayal burning in her chest. All this time he'd known. He'd let them get close, let Zion grow attached, while his company was pricing them out of their home. She slammed her laptop shut and pressed her hands to her eyes, holding back angry tears. Was this some kind of sick game to him? Did rich men really have nothing better to do than toy with the lives of people like her? The next day at the diner, Raya was cleaning tables when the bell jingled. Julian walked in, unexpected on a Tuesday morning. The sight of him, handsome, confident, carrying a small gift bag, only fueled her anger. Table for one? Dottie asked him. Actually, I was hoping to speak with Raya for a moment, Julian said, his eyes finding hers across the room. Raya nodded, stiffly, and gestured toward an empty booth in the corner. She didn't sit down. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice cold. Julian's smile faltered. I wanted to surprise you. I found this book Zion might like. Stop, Raya cut him off. Just stop pretending you care about us. Confusion crossed Julian's face. Raya, what? I know who you are, she said, keeping her voice low but unable to hide her anger. Rhodes Enterprises. You own my building. Julian's expression fell. Raya, I can explain. Explain what? How you've been playing us this whole time? Getting close to us while your company pushes us out? She felt tears threatening and fought them back. Was this fun for you? Some kind of poverty tourism? No, Raya, it wasn't like that at all. Julian reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Then what was it like, Julian? Because from where I'm standing, you've been lying since the day we met. Julian ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident on his face. I wasn't lying. I didn't know how to tell you. Tell me what, that you're the reason my rent keeps going up? That you're the reason I'm working 2 jobs and still barely making ends meet? I didn't know, Julian insisted, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. About your building, about the rent increases. I swear I didn't know. Raya laughed bitterly. You expect me to believe the CEO doesn't know what his own company is doing? Rhodes Enterprises has over 300 properties, Julian said. The day-to-day operations are handled by management teams. I focus on acquisitions and development. Convenient, Raya said, crossing her arms. But true, Julian countered. Raya, please, let me fix this. Fix what, my rent, and then what? I become your charity case, the poor single mom you rescued? She shook her head. No thanks. Julian's face hardened. That's not fair. You know, that's not how I see you. Do I? Because I'm not sure I know anything about you at all. Raya glanced at the clock. My break's over. You should go. Raya, please, Julian, just go. He stood there for a moment longer, the gift bag still in. His hand, his eyes pleading with her to listen. But Raya had turned her back, disappearing into the kitchen. Julian placed the bag on the table and walked out. That night, Zion asked about Julian during bedtime. Is Mr. Julian coming to the store tomorrow? Raya smoothed his covers, avoiding his. No, baby, I don't think we'll be seeing Mr. Julian anymore. Why not? Did he go away like Daddy did? The innocent question cut through Raya's anger, reminding her that her son had already lost one man in his life. Now she was taking away another. No, it's not like that, she said gently. Mr. Julian and I we want different things. Zion's lower lip trembled. But I like him. He reads the dragon voices good. Raya fought back tears. I know you do, baby. But sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings, like when you're mad and sad at the same time. Zion asked. Raya smiled sadly. Exactly like that. After Zion fell asleep, Raya checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Julian and a text. Please let me explain. This isn't what you think. She turned off her phone and went to bed. Julian sat in his penthouse office, staring out at the city lights. On his desk was a stack of reports about Millwood Heights, the property Raya's apartment was in. He'd been reading them for hours, growing angrier with each page. His phone rang, and he answered without checking who it was. Rhodes? Julian, it's Marcus. Did you get my message about the West Side development? Julian pinched the bridge of his nose. Marcus Chen was his CFO and oldest friend. Not now, Marcus. What's going on? You've been AWOL all day. The board is getting antsy about the West Side vote. I said not now. Julian's tone left no room for argument. Marcus sighed. Fine. But whatever's got you in this mood, handle it fast. We've got too much riding on this deal. Julian hung up and went back to the reports. The more he read, the clearer the picture became. Millwood Heights had been acquired 18 months ago as part of a larger portfolio purchase. The management company had been implementing aggressive rent increases, minimal improvements, and pushing out long-term tenants to renovate units and bring in higher-paying residents. It was all standard practice in the industry, but seeing it through Raya's eyes made Julian sick to his stomach. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. This is Rhodes. I need all rent increases at Millwood Heights cancelled immediately, and schedule a meeting with the property management team for tomorrow morning. Thursday came, and Raya deliberately went to a different grocery store. She told herself it was because they had better prices, not because she was avoiding Julian. But when Zion asked why they weren't going to their store, she couldn't meet his eyes. When they got home, there was an envelope taped to their door. Her name was written on it in neat handwriting she recognized immediately. Inside was a letter and a child's drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. The tallest one had a tie. "Raya, I've cancelled all planned rent increases at Millwood Heights. Not just for your unit, but for everyone. I've also fired the management company and hired a new one with clear instructions about fair treatment of tenants. I know this doesn't fix the hurt I caused by not being honest with you. I should have told you who I was from the beginning. The truth is I was afraid. For the first time in years, someone was seeing me, just me, not my money or my company. Your son hugged me like I was worth something when the world only sees what I'm worth. I don't expect your forgiveness, but please know that meeting you and Zion has changed me. I'm re-evaluating everything, how my company operates, what values we promote, what legacy I want to leave. If you ever want to talk, I'll be at our grocery store next Thursday, and the Thursday after that, and the one after that. Yours, Julian P.S. Zion's book is in the management office. I wasn't sure if you'd accept it directly from me." Raya read the letter twice, her anger warring with something softer, something that had been growing since that first day in the cereal aisle. Julian sat in his office, staring at the West Side development plans spread across his desk. It was the biggest project Rhodes Enterprises had ever undertaken. Luxury condos, high-end retail, a complete transformation of a neglected part of the city. Marcus entered without knocking. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Are you ready?" Julian didn't look up. "I'm making some changes to the proposal," Marcus frowned. "What changes? The plans were finalized weeks ago." "Not anymore." Julian turned his computer screen so Marcus could see. "I'm adding affordable housing units, 20% of the total." 20. "Julian, that will slash our profits." "It will still be profitable," Julian countered. "Just not obscenely so." Marcus stared at him. "What's gotten into you lately? First, Millwood Heights, now this? The board will never approve, and then I'll buy them out," Julian said simply. "It's my company, Marcus. I get final say." "This is about that woman, isn't it? The one you've been seeing?" Julian's jaw tightened. "This is about doing what's right." Marcus shook his head. "The Julian Rhodes I know doesn't make business decisions based on what's right. He makes them based on what's profitable. Maybe that Julian Rhodes needed to change." Julian stood up, gathering his papers. "Are you with me on this or not?" Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You really care about her, don't you?" Julian didn't answer directly. "I care about the kind of man I'm becoming." A week passed, then another. Raya threw herself into work, trying not to think about Julian or the empty space he'd left in their lives. But Zion kept asking about him, and each time the excuses got harder to make. One evening there was a knock at their door. Raya opened it to find Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor, holding a newspaper. "Have you seen this?" she asked, pointing to an article. "It's about your young man." "He's not my young man," Raya said automatically, but she took the paper. The headline read, "Rhodes shifts focus. Billionaire developer announces affordable housing initiative." The article detailed how Julian Rhodes was restructuring his company's approach to urban development, pledging to include affordable housing in all future projects and implementing tenant protection policies across his existing properties. There was a quote from Julian. "Business success shouldn't come at the expense of community well-being. Rhodes Enterprises is committed to being part of the solution to the housing crisis, not contributing to the problem." At the end of the article was a personal note that made Raya's heart skip. Rhodes declined to discuss what prompted this change, in direction saying only that, "Sometimes it takes a child's perspective to see what really matters." Mrs. Patterson was watching her face. "Seems like he's trying to do right." Raya folded the newspaper. "Seems like it." That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Julian, his face when Zion hugged him that first day, his laugh during their ice cream outings, the way he listened to her like every word mattered. Had she been too quick to judge? Too unwilling to hear his side? The next morning, she dropped Zion at daycare and headed to work, but instead of turning toward the diner, she found herself walking toward the gleaming downtown tower that housed Rhodes Enterprises. She wasn't sure what she'd say when she got there. She wasn't even sure they'd let her in. But something was pulling her forward, something stronger than pride or anger or fear. In the lobby, she approached the reception desk, suddenly aware of her waitress uniform and scuffed shoes. "I'd like to see Julian Rhodes," she said, trying to sound confident. The receptionist didn't bother looking up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but Mr. Rhodes doesn't see anyone without an appointment." Raya took a deep breath. "Could you please tell him Raya Thompson is here?" The receptionist finally looked up, her expression skeptical. "And what is this regarding?" Before Raya could answer, the elevator doors opened and Julian stepped out. He was deep in conversation with another man, both of them focused on the document in Julian's hands. Then he looked up and saw her. Everything else seemed to fade away. The bustling lobby, the curious receptionist, the man at Julian's side. There was only Raya and Julian, and the space between them that suddenly felt both vast and non-existent. Julian handed the document to his companion without taking his eyes off Raya. "Marcus, handle this for me." Marcus looked between them, understanding, dawning on his face. "Take your time," he said, and walked away. Julian crossed the lobby slowly, as if afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. "Raya," he said, her name a question and an answer all at once. "I saw the article," she said, "about the affordable housing." Julian nodded. "It was the right thing to do." "Was it for me?" Raya asked, needing to know. "No," Julian said honestly. "It was because of you, because you made me see things differently. But I did it because it was right, not to win you back." The distinction meant everything. Raya took a step closer. "Zion misses you," she said softly. Hope flickered in Julian's eyes. "Just Zion?" Raya met his gaze steadily. "No, not just Zion." Julian reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Will you have dinner with me tonight?" he asked. "Both of you. I know a place that makes great burgers." The simplicity of the invitation, not some fancy restaurant, but somewhere Zion would enjoy, told Raya everything she needed to know about the man Julian truly was. "Yes," she said, "we'd like that." As they stood there in the middle of the lobby, hands barely touching but something powerful flowing between them, Raya realized that sometimes the strongest connections begin with the smallest gestures, like a child's hug and a man brave enough to hug back. The burger place Julian chose was nothing like Raya expected. No white tablecloths or snooty waiters, just a family-owned joint with checkered tablecloths and crayons for the kids. When they arrived, Julian was already waiting, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt rather than his usual suit. "Mr. Julian!" Zion broke free from Raya's hand and ran to him. Julian's face lit up as he knelt to receive Zion's hug. "Hey, buddy, I missed you. I missed you too. Mama said you were busy with important things." Julian looked up at Raya, gratitude in his eyes for the gentle explanation she'd given her son. "I was," he said to Zion, "but nothing as important as spending time with you and your mum." The simple honesty in his voice made Raya's chest tighten. She'd spent days rehearsing what she'd say to him, prepared for awkwardness, but now that they were here it felt surprisingly normal. "I ordered some appetizers," Julian said as they sat down. "I hope that's okay." "You didn't have to do that," Raya said automatically. Julian smiled. "I wanted to. I wasn't sure what Zion likes, so I got a few different things." As if on cue, a waitress appeared with a tray of mozzarella sticks, onion rings, and mini corn dogs. Zion's eyes widened. "Can I have one, Mama? Please." "After you wash your hands," Raya said. Julian pointed to a door at the back. "Restrooms are that way. Want me to take him?" The offer surprised Raya. Sure, if you don't mind." "Not at all." Julian stood and held out his hand to Zion. "Come on, buddy. Let's go wash up." As they walked away, Zion chattering the whole time, Raya watched them with a mixture of emotions. She'd been so angry at Julian, felt so betrayed, but seeing him with her son, gentle, patient, genuinely interested in what the 5-year-old had to say, made it hard to hold on to that anger. When they returned, Zion's hands still damp but clean, Julian helped him into the booster seat, and showed him how to dip the corn dogs in ketchup, just the right way. "So, Julian," said once Zion was happily eating, "how have you been?" Such a simple question, but Raya knew it contained multitudes. "Better," she said honestly. "The new management company you hired is actually responsive. They fixed our leaky faucet the same day I reported it." "Good. That's how it should be." Julian hesitated. "And you? Not just the apartment. How are you?" Raya met his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what happened. And I think maybe I judged you too harshly." She twisted her napkin in her lap. "I was scared." Julian looked surprised. "Of me? Of what you represent?" Raya glanced at Zion to make sure he was distracted with his food. "Money changes people, Julian. It changes how they see the world, how they treat others. I've seen it happen." Julian nodded slowly. "I understand that, and you're not wrong. Money does change people. It changed me." He leaned forward. "But meeting you and Zion, that changed me too, for the better." The sincerity in his voice was impossible to doubt. Still, Raya had questions. "What happened at your company? After you found out about Millwood Heights?" Julian's expression darkened. "I did a full audit of our property management practices. What I found that it wasn't good, Raya. We've been pushing people out of their homes for profit, hiding behind corporate policies and market rates. And now? Now we're changing everything. New tenant protection policies, rent control initiatives, maintenance response guarantees." He ran a hand through his hair. "The board wasn't happy. Some of the shareholders threatened to sue. But you did it anyway." "Yes." His gaze was steady. "It was the right thing to do, even though it cost you money." Julian shrugged. "I have enough money. What I was missing was—" He trailed off, searching for the words. "Purpose," Raya suggested. "Humanity," Julian corrected. "I'd forgotten what it means to see people as people, not just numbers on a spreadsheet." Zion, who had been quietly eating, suddenly piped up. "Can I have ice cream for dessert?" The question broke the tension, and they both laughed. "We haven't even had our main course yet," Raya said, ruffling his hair. "But we can definitely have ice cream after," Julian added with a wink at Zion. The rest of dinner passed easily. They talked about small things: Zion's kindergarten adventures, a movie Julian had seen, a funny customer at the diner. By the time they finished their ice cream sundaes, Raya felt more relaxed than she had in weeks. Outside the restaurant, Julian walked them to Raya's car. Zion, full and happy, was starting to drag his feet with tiredness. "I had a good time tonight," Julian said, his hands in his pockets. "Me too," Raya admitted. Would you like to do this again?" The hesitation in his voice, this powerful man suddenly unsure of himself, touched something in Raya. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." Julian's smile was like sunrise. "Good. That's good." Before she could think better of it, Raya stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. "Good night, Julian." His hand came up to touch the spot, his eyes wide with surprise and something like wonder. "Good night, Raya." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a new routine. Dinner twice a week, once with Zion, once just the two of them after Raya's shift while Mrs. Patterson watched Zion. Weekend outings to the park or the children's museum, nothing extravagant, nothing that made Raya feel like Julian was trying to impress her or buy her affection. He asked questions about her life, her dreams, her struggles, and actually listened to the answers. He told her about his own past, growing up with wealth but emotional poverty, losing his sister, building his company as a way to control a world that had taken so much from him. "After Emily died, my parents, they checked out," Julian explained. One evening as they walked along the riverfront. "Dad buried himself in work, Mom in charity events. Neither of them knew how to handle their grief, so they just didn't." "That must have been lonely," Raya said softly. Julian nodded. "It was. I promised myself I'd never be vulnerable like that again. I focused on building something no one could take away from me. Your company." "Yes. Rhodes Enterprises became my identity, my purpose. I thought if I made it big enough, strong enough, I'd never feel that emptiness again." He laughed without humor. Turns out you can be surrounded by people in boardrooms every day and still be completely alone. Raya took his hand, a gesture that was becoming natural between them. You're not alone now. Julian squeezed her fingers. No. Thanks to a 5-year-old, who doesn't know the meaning of stranger danger. They both laughed, but there was truth beneath the joke. Zion's innocent mistake in the grocery store had broken through walls Julian had spent years building. One Saturday, Julian suggested taking Zion to the zoo. Raya agreed, though she worried about the cost. My treat, Julian said when she reached for her wallet at the entrance. Julian, please, Raya, let me do this. She reluctantly agreed, but as they walked through the exhibits, she couldn't help. Noticing the ease with which Julian handed over his credit card for overpriced snacks and gift shop souvenirs. You don't have to buy him everything he points at, she said quietly when Zion ran ahead to look at the elephants. Julian frowned. I'm not trying to spoil him. I want him to have a good time. He would have a good time without all the extras, Raya said. I don't want him getting used to this. To what? To money solving everything, to getting whatever he wants just by asking. Julian was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. You're right. I didn't think about how it might look to him. Raya softened. It's not that I don't appreciate it. I do. But I've worked hard to teach Zion the value of things, that we can't always have everything we want right when we want it. I understand. Julian looked thoughtful. My parents threw money at everything. It was easier than giving time or attention. He met her eyes. I don't want to be that kind of person in Zion's life. The fact that he was thinking about his role in Zion's life, not just for today but long term, wasn't lost on Raya. What kind of person do you want to be? She asked. Julian watched as Zion pressed his face against the glass of the elephant enclosure, his expression full of wonder. Someone who makes the air feel quiet, he said, echoing Zion's words from weeks ago. Raya's heart turned over in her chest. The differences in their worlds became more apparent as their relationship deepened. Julian tried to keep things simple, but his life was complicated by nature. There were business dinners he couldn't avoid, social obligations tied to his position. I've been invited to the Children's Hospital Gala next weekend, he mentioned, one evening. Would you come with me? Raya hesitated. I don't know, Julian, that's not really my scene. It could be, he said. I'd like to show you that part of my life too. The thought of mingling with the city's elite, people who probably paid Raya's monthly rent for a single dinner, made her stomach twist with anxiety. I wouldn't know how to act, what to wear. Just be yourself. That's all I want. Julian took her hand. But if you're really uncomfortable, we don't have to go. The fact that he was giving her an out, not pressuring her, made Raya reconsider. What would I wear to something like that? Julian's face brightened. Whatever you want. But if you'd like help, I know someone who could... No, Raya cut him off. No stylists or personal shoppers or whatever rich people use. If I do this, I do it my way. Julian held up his hands in surrender. Your way it is. The night of the gala, Raya stood in front of her mirror, second-guessing her decision. She'd found a simple black dress at a consignment shop, nothing fancy but elegant in its simplicity. Mrs. Patterson had helped style her hair in an updo that made Raya feel like a different person. When Julian knocked on her door, his breath caught at the sight of her. You look beautiful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. It's nothing special, Raya said, suddenly self-conscious. You're wrong. Julian stepped forward and took her hands. You're the most special person I've ever known. The gala was exactly as intimidating as Raya had feared. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, women dripping in jewels that could pay off her student loans. She felt eyes on her as Julian led her through the crowd, his hand warm against the small of her back. Julian. There you are. A woman in a red dress approached, air-kissing Julian's cheek. We were beginning to think you weren't coming. I wouldn't miss it, Victoria. The Children's Hospital does important work. Julian turned to Raya. This is Raya Thompson. Raya, Victoria Marsh, chair of the hospital board. Victoria's eyes assessed. Raya with practiced politeness. How lovely to meet you. How do you know our Julian? Before Raya could answer, a voice called out from behind them. There's the man of the hour. A silver-haired man in an expensive suit clapped Julian on the shoulder. "The board's been asking about you. We need to discuss the West Side project." Julian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Marcus, you remember the West Side plans are finalized." "Yes, but Peterson has some concerns about the affordable housing allocation. He thinks we're being too generous." "It's not up for negotiation." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more people. Business associates, society friends, each wanting a piece of Julian's attention. Raya watched as he navigated the social waters with practiced ease, but she could see the strain beneath his smile. During a brief moment alone, she touched his arm. "Are you okay?" Julian looked down at her, something vulnerable in his eyes. "This is all so meaningless. I used to think these connections mattered. Now I see it's all just people trying to use each other." "Not everyone," Raya said softly. Julian's expression softened. "No, not everyone." Later, as the evening wound down, Julian was pulled into yet another business conversation. Raya slipped away to find the restroom, needing a moment to herself as Sao. She washed her hands, the door opened, and two women entered, laughing. They didn't notice Raya at first. "Did you see Julian Rhodes's date?" one asked, applying fresh lipstick. "Where do you think he found her?" "She's pretty enough, but clearly not from our world." "Probably some waitress or shop girl he's slumming with," the other replied. "Men like Julian always have these phases before they settle down with someone appropriate." Raya froze, her hands still under the water. "She does seem sweet, though," the first woman mused. "Naive but sweet. She'll learn, they always do." The second woman caught sight of Raya in the mirror and fell silent, her eyes widening in recognition. Raya turned off the water, dried her hands with deliberate slowness, and walked out without a word, her head high, despite the burning in her cheek. She found Julian by the bar looking around for her. "There you are," he said, relief in his voice. "I was worried you'd gotten lost." "Can we leave?" Raya asked, her voice tight. Julian studied her face. "Of course. What happened?" "Nothing. I'm just tired." In the car, Julian kept glancing at her. "Raya, please tell me what's wrong." She stared out the window. "Is this a phase for you? Slumming with the waitress before you settle down with someone appropriate?" Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Who said that to you?" "It doesn't matter. Is it true?" Julian pulled the car over and turned to face her. "Look at me, Raya." She reluctantly met his eyes. "What I feel for you is not a phase. It's the most real thing in my life." His voice was low, intense. "Those people back there, they're not my world anymore. You and Zion, you're what matters to me now. But we come from different places, Julian. Those women were right about one thing. I don't belong in your world. Then I'll belong in yours." Julian reached for her hand. "Or we'll build a new one together. I don't care about any of it, the galas, the business dinners, the social climbing, if it means losing you." Raya wanted to believe him, but doubt, planted by those cruel words in the bathroom, had taken root. "Take me home, Julian, please." He drove her back in silence, the gulf between their worlds suddenly feeling wider than ever. At her door, Julian tried once more. "Raya, please don't let what those women said come between us." "It's not just what they said." Raya wrapped her arms around herself. "It's everything. Your life, my life, they're so different. But what we feel for each other isn't." Julian stepped closer. "I love you, Raya. I think I have since that first day in the grocery store." The words hung in the air between them, honest and terrifying, in their simplicity. "I need time," Raya whispered, "to think." Julian nodded, pain evident in his eyes but respect in his posture as he stepped back. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." After he left, Raya checked on Zion, who was sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Patterson's apartment. She told her neighbor she'd pick him up in the morning, then returned to her own place. Alone in her small living room, Raya looked around at the life she'd built. Modest but honest, full of love, if not luxury. Then she thought of Julian's world, the old penthouse offices, the galas, the people who saw her as a temporary diversion in his life. Could those worlds ever truly merge? Or was she setting herself and Zion up for heartbreak? The phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Raya Thompson?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Nurse Wilson from Memorial Hospital. We have your son Zion in our emergency room." The world stopped. "What? No, that's impossible. He's at my neighbor's. Ma'am, there was a fire in an apartment building on Elm Street. Your son was brought in for smoke inhalation. He's asking for you." Raya's heart crashed against her ribs. "I'm on my way." She hung up and dialed Julian. Without thinking, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. He answered on the first ring. "Raya?" "Julian, there's been a fire. Zion's in the hospital. I don't have a car. I'm coming. 5 minutes." He made it in 3. The hospital emergency room was chaos. Raya burst through the doors, Julian right behind her. "My son," she gasped to the receptionist. "Zion Thompson, there was a fire. Raya." She turned to see Mrs. Patterson, her face streaked with soot, sitting in a wheelchair with an oxygen mask. "Clara, where's Zion? Is he okay?" "He's in treatment room 3, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice raspy. "The doctors are with him now. He inhaled some smoke, but he was so brave, Raya." Julian put his hand on Raya's shoulder. "Let's find him." They were directed to a treatment area where they found Zion on a bed, a small oxygen mask over his face. A doctor was checking his vitals. "Zion!" Raya rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. Zion's eyes lit up when he saw her. He pulled the mask down. "Mama, Mr. Julian." "Keep that on, buddy," Julian said gently, adjusting the mask back over Zion's mouth and nose. The doctor looked up. "Are you the mother?" "Yes," Raya said, holding Zion's small hand. "How is he?" "He's going to be fine. Mild smoke inhalation, no burns. We want to keep him overnight for observation, but he should be able to go home tomorrow." Relief washed over Raya in a wave so powerful her knees nearly buckled. Julian's arm came around her waist, steadying her. "What happened?" she asked Mrs. Patterson, who had been wheeled in by a nurse. "I fell asleep watching TV," the older woman said, shame in her voice. "Something in the apartment below us caught fire. The smoke alarm woke me up, but the hallway was already filling with smoke. Zion," her voice broke. Zion was the one who remembered what to do. He got down low like they taught him in school, found his way to the door, helped me up. Raya looked at her son with amazement and pride. "The firefighters said if he hadn't acted so quickly, we might not have made it out," Mrs. Patterson continued. "He saved my life, Raya." Zion pulled the mask down again. "I wasn't scared, Mama. Well, maybe a little. But I remembered the firefighter who came to school said to stay low and find the door." "That's my brave boy," Raya said, kissing his forehead. Julian had been quiet, but now he squeezed Raya's shoulder. "I'll go check on your apartment, see what the damage is. You don't have to." "I want to." His eyes met hers. "Let me help, Raya. Please." She nodded, too exhausted and grateful to argue. While Julian was gone, the doctor explained that Zion would need to stay overnight. A nurse helped get him settled in a pediatric room, with Raya by his side. As Zion drifted off to sleep, the events of the night caught up with Raya. The gala, the cruel words in the bathroom, her doubts about her relationship with Julian, all of it seemed so trivial now. What mattered was that her son was safe, and when she needed someone, Julian had been there without question. Julian returned a few hours later, his expensive suit now smelling of smoke. "How is he?" he asked, looking at Zion's sleeping form. "Better. The doctor says his oxygen levels are good." Raya studied Julian's face. "What did you find out?" Julian sat in the chair beside her. "The fire was contained to the apartment below yours, but there's water and smoke damage throughout the building. They won't let anyone back in for at least a week, maybe longer." Raya closed her eyes. "All our things, most of it should be salvageable, but you won't be able to stay there." Julian hesitated. "I've booked you and Zion a suite at the Madison Hotel for now." "Julian, we can't afford—" "It's taken care of," he said firmly. "And before you object, this isn't charity. This is me helping someone I love in an emergency." Love, there was that word again. In the quiet hospital room with her son sleeping peacefully nearby, Raya finally let herself acknowledge what she'd been feeling for weeks. "I love you too," she whispered. Julian's eyes widened. "You do?" Raya nodded. "When I thought something had happened to Zion, you were the first person I called. Not because you have a car or because you could help, but because I needed you. Just you. Julian took her hand, bringing it to his lips. I will always be there when you need me, both of you. Even if it means dealing with apartment fires instead of charity galas? Julian smiled. I'd rather be in a burning building with you than at a gala with anyone else. Raya laughed softly, then grew serious. This doesn't solve everything. We still come from different worlds. Maybe, Julian agreed, but tonight proved what matters most, and it's not which fork to use at dinner or how much money someone has. He squeezed her hand. It's who shows up when things fall apart. Raya leaned her head against his shoulder, the exhaustion of the night finally catching up with her. Get some rest, Julian murmured. I'll be right here. As she drifted off to sleep, Raya thought about how her life had changed since that day in the Toul grocery store. Her simple hug from her son had somehow led to this, finding love in the most unexpected place, with a man who was learning to tear down walls rather than build them. Tomorrow they would face the practical realities of the fire damage, finding temporary housing, replacing what was lost. But for now, in this quiet hospital room, Raya finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, their different worlds could become one. Zion was released from the hospital the next day with a clean bill of health and a red firefighter's hat, gifted by the crew who had responded to the blaze. Despite Raya's protests, Julian insisted on driving them to the Madison Hotel, where a 2-bedroom suite awaited. When the elevator doors opened directly into the suite, Zion's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. Whoa, this is like a castle. He ran from room to room, discovering the plush king-sized beds, the massive bathtub with jets, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Julian, this is too much, Raya whispered as they watched Zion explore. It's just a hotel room, Julian said softly, and it's only temporary until we figure out next steps. Raya appreciated that he said we instead of taking over, but the opulence of their surroundings made her uncomfortable. The suite probably cost more per night than her weekly salary. As if reading her thoughts, Julian added, I own shares in the Madison. They owed me a favor. Raya wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. You should get some rest, Julian said, heading toward the door. I've got some meetings I can't reschedule, but I'll be back this evening. The hotel staff will bring anything you need, just call down. Thank you, Raya said, and meant it. Despite her discomfort with the luxury, she was grateful for the safe, clean place for Zion to recover. After Julian left, Raya tried to relax, but her mind kept spinning with worries. What would they do after the hotel? How badly damaged was their apartment? What about all their things? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A hotel employee stood there with several shopping bags. Delivery for Miss Thompson, he said, handing over the bags before Raya could object. Inside, she found new clothes for both her and Zion, simple, practical items in the right sizes. Not designer labels, just good quality basics from a department store. There was also a note from Julian. Thought you might need these until we can check the damage to your things. Nothing fancy, just the essentials. Hope that's okay. Taichi, the thoughtfulness of the gesture, and the fact that he'd clearly tried to respect her feelings about money, brought tears to Raya's eyes. When Julian returned that evening, he brought dinner from a local restaurant and news about their apartment. The building inspector says it'll be at least 3 weeks before anyone can move back in, he explained as they ate at the suite's dining table. The damage to your unit is mostly smoke and water, but they need to check the structural integrity of the building. Raya nodded, trying to process what this meant for them. 3 weeks in a hotel would drain her savings, even with the discounted rate Julian had mentioned. I spoke to your landlord, Julian continued. He's waiving rent while the building is uninhabitable, and your renter's insurance should cover temporary housing costs. I don't have renter's insurance, Raya admitted, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. It had always seemed like an unnecessary expense when every dollar counted. Julian was quiet for a moment. Would it help if I covered the hotel for now? Just until things get sorted out. I can't let you do that. Why not? Because... Raya struggled to articulate her feelings. Because it makes things uneven between us. You giving, me taking. Julian set down his fork. Raya, relationships aren't balance sheets. They're about being there for each other in whatever ways we can. That's easy to say when you're the one with all the resources, Raya countered. Julian considered this. You're right, but you give me things money can't buy. His voice softened. Before I met you and Zion, I had everything and nothing at the same time. A successful company, a penthouse, cars, investments, but no one to share any of it with. No one who saw me as just Julian, not Julian Rhodes, CEO. Raya remembered that first hug in the grocery store, how Julian had looked when Zion wrapped his arms around his leg, like a man who'd been starving without realizing it. I still don't want to take advantage, she said. You're not. But how about this? I'll cover the hotel for now, and when you're back on your feet, you can pay it forward somehow. Help someone else in need. It was a compromise Raya could live with. Okay, but just until we find something more reasonable. Julian nodded, relief evident in his expression. Deal. After dinner, while Zion was engrossed in a cartoon on the huge TV, Julian pulled out his tablet. I thought we could look at some options, he said. For more permanent housing, Raya frowned. I have an apartment. Once it's fixed, I know. But maybe this is an opportunity to consider alternatives. Julian pulled up a real estate listing. There's a townhouse available in Riverside Park, good school district, close to public transportation, 2 bedrooms. Julian, I can't afford a townhouse. What if you could? Julian asked carefully. What if there was a way to make it work? Raya studied his face. What are you suggesting? Julian took a deep breath. I've been thinking about this for a while. Actually, before the fire, Rhodes Enterprises has a program for first-time homebuyers, 0 down payment, subsidized mortgage rates. It's part of our new community initiative. And you want me to apply for this program? Raya asked skeptically. If you're interested, yes, you'd qualify based on income and credit score. Julian hurried to add, it would be completely legitimate, Raya. No special treatment. The same terms anyone else in the program would get. Raya was quiet, processing the offer. On one hand, the idea of owning her own home, providing that stability for Zion, was tempting. On the other hand, it felt like another way she'd be indebted to Julian. I need to think about it, she finally said. Julian nodded. Of course. No pressure. But as the days passed in the hotel suite, Raya found herself thinking about the townhouse more and more. Julian had shown her photos. Nothing lavish, just a modest 2-story with a small backyard. The kind of place where Zion could have his own room, where they could plant flowers and put up a swing set. The kind of place that could be a home. A week after the fire, Julian invited Raya to his penthouse for dinner. Just the 2 of them. Mrs. Patterson, who had also been relocated to the hotel courtesy of Julian, offered to watch Zion. Are you sure you're up for this? Raya asked the older woman. You're still recovering yourself. Nonsense, the doctor says I'm fine, and that boy is the best medicine. Mrs. Patterson waved her concerns away. Besides, you 2 need some time alone. Go on now. Julian's driver picked Raya up in a sleek, black car that made her feel both glamorous and out of place. As they drove through the city toward the downtown high-rise where Julian lived, Raya watched the neighborhoods change, from familiar working-class streets to the gleaming towers of wealth and privilege. Julian was waiting for her in the lobby. He'd traded his usual suit for dark jeans and a light blue button-down that brought out the warmth in his eyes. You look beautiful, he said, taking in her simple dress, one of the items he'd sent to the hotel. Thank you. Raya glanced around. The marble-floored lobby with its modern art and uniformed doormen. So this is where you live? Part of the time, Julian said, leading her to a private elevator. Lately, it's been feeling less and less like home. The elevator opened directly into Julian's penthouse, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling, windows that showcased a breathtaking view of the city. The decor was modern and masculine, all clean lines and neutral colors. Expensive, certainly, but lacking the warmth of a true home. This is... Raya searched for the right word. Impersonal, Julian suggested with a self-deprecating smile. I know. I hired a designer when I bought the place, never really bothered to make it my own. He led her through to the kitchen, where the signs of his effort were evident. Grocery bags on the counter, a cookbook open, ingredients laid out. "You're cooking?" Raya asked, surprised. Julian looked sheepish. "Trying to. I found a recipe for sweet potato pie. Thought I'd attempt to recreate that memory you told me about." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Raya deeply. "Julian, it probably won't be as good as your grandmother's," he said quickly. "But I wanted to try." "Show me what you've got so far," Raya said, rolling up her sleeves. They worked side by side in the kitchen, Julian following Raya's instructions. He was clumsy with the rolling pin, and they laughed when the pie crust tore and had to be patched together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real in a way that nothing else in the penthouse felt. While the pie baked, they ate the simple pasta dish Julian had prepared as the main course. The conversation flowed easily between them, moving from light topics to deeper ones. "I went to look at the townhouse yesterday," Raya admitted after a lull in conversation. Julian's eyes brightened. "You did? What did you think?" "It's lovely. The yard is perfect for Zion, and the schools in that district are excellent." She twisted her napkin in her lap. "I talked to the program administrator. She walked me through the application process, the terms." And it seems too good to be true," Raya said honestly. "Not just for me, but for anyone in the program. How can Rhodes Enterprises afford to offer these terms?" Julian sat back in his chair. "It's actually quite simple. We allocate a percentage of profits from our luxury developments to subsidize affordable housing. The buyers still pay the full price of the home over time. We're just making the path to ownership more accessible." "And the board approved this?" "Not without a fight," Julian admitted. "But I made it clear it was non-negotiable, especially after what happened at Millwood Heights." Raya studied him, seeing the changes that had taken place in Julian since they'd met. The sharp businessman was still there, but now tempered with compassion and purpose. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. Julian looked surprised. "For what?" "For using your position to make a difference, for seeing beyond the bottom line." Julian reached across the table for her hand. "I had a good teacher." After dinner, they moved to the balcony with slices of their imperfect but delicious sweet potato pie. The night air was cool, the city lights spread out below them like stars. "I've been thinking," Julian said after a while, "about us, about the future." Raya's heart quickened. "Oh?" "These past few weeks have shown me what matters. When I thought you and Zion might be hurt in that fire." He shook his head, unable to complete the thought. "And then, staying in that hotel suite with you both, it was the first time that space felt like a home." "Julian, please, let me finish." He took a deep breath. "I know we come from different worlds. I know there are challenges we'll face because of that. But I also know that I love you, Raya, you and Zion both, and I want to build a life with you." Raya felt tears prick her eyes. "We've only known each other a few months. Sometimes a few months is all it takes," Julian said, moving closer to her. "Sometimes a single moment in a grocery store is enough." Raya thought about that moment, Zion hugging Julian's leg, Julian kneeling to hug him back. How something had shifted in her world right then, though she hadn't recognized it at the time. "I'm not proposing," Julian clarified. "Not yet. That would bear rushing things. But I wanted you to know where I stand, what I hope for." Raya reached up to touch his face, the stubble rough beneath her fingertips. "I hope for that too," she whispered. "But I'm scared, Julian." "Of what?" "Of losing myself, of becoming dependent, of Zion getting hurt if things don't work out." Julian covered her hand with his own. "I understand that, and I promise you whatever happens between us, I will never use my resources to control you or to buy Zion's affection. You're both too important to me for that." Raya believed him. Despite their different backgrounds, despite the complications money could bring, she trusted Julian's heart. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we take it one day at a time," Julian said. "We figure it out together." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Raya applied for the homebuyer program and was approved, legitimately as Julian had promised. She signed the papers for the townhouse in Riverside Park, still half expecting to wake up from a dream. "It's really mine?" she asked the program administrator after the closing. "All yours," the woman confirmed, handing over the keys. Congratulations. Ms. Thompson, you're a homeowner. The move-in coincided with the completion of repairs at her old apartment building. Julian hired a crew to help salvage what they could from her old place and move it to the new one. Most of their furniture had survived with minimal damage, and what couldn't be saved, Raya replaced with simple, affordable pieces. Julian offered to help with the costs, but Raya insisted on doing it her way. "This is our home," she told him. "I want to build it with my own hands, my own work." He respected her wishes, though he couldn't resist a few housewarming gifts: a new bicycle for Zion, a set of gardening tools for the backyard, a comfortable reading chair for the living room. Just small things, he insisted, when Raya raised an eyebrow at the deliveries. Practical things, and they were for the most part. Julian was learning to navigate the delicate balance between generosity and respect for Raya's independence. Meanwhile, changes were happening at Rhodes Enterprises too. Julian had made good on his promise to reshape the company's approach to development. The affordable housing initiative was expanding, with plans for mixed-income communities rather than isolated luxury enclaves. Not everyone was happy with the new direction. Some board members resigned in protest. Others grudgingly admitted that the positive press was good for business. Marcus, initially skeptical, had become Julian's strongest ally in implementing the changes. "You were right," Marcus told Julian one day after a particularly contentious board meeting. "We can do well by doing good." Julian just smiled. "I had the right motivation." One Saturday morning, about 3 months after moving into the townhouse, Raya was in the small backyard planting flowers with Zion. The spring air was warm, birds singing in the maple tree that shaded the yard. "Can we plant red ones here, Mama?" Zion asked, pointing to an empty spot in the flower bed. "Sure, baby, hand me those geraniums." As they worked together, Raya felt a contentment she hadn't known in years. This was their home, truly theirs. A place where Zion could put down roots, where they could build memories. The sound of the gate opening made them both look up. Julian stood there, casual in jeans and a t-shirt, a tray of coffee cups in one hand and a bag from their favorite bakery in the other. "Mr. Julian." Zion jumped up, his small hands covered in dirt, and ran to him. Julian set down the food and coffee just in time to catch Zion in a hug. "Hey, buddy, how's the gardening going? We're making it pretty. Come see?" Julian let Zion lead him by the hand to the flower bed, where Raya was still kneeling. Their eyes met over Zion's head, and the love Raya saw there made her heart swell. "Good morning," Julian said softly. "Morning," Raya replied, rising to dust the soil from her knees. "This is a nice surprise. I thought you might need fuel for your gardening project." Julian held up the bakery bag. "Chocolate croissants for Zion, cinnamon rolls for you." "My favorite," Zion exclaimed, reaching for the bag. "Hands, Zion," Raya reminded him. "Go wash up first." As Zion ran inside, Julian stepped closer to Raya. "I missed you," he said. Even though they'd seen each other just the day before, "I missed you too." Raya accepted the coffee he offered. "How was your meeting this morning?" "Productive. The City Council approved our proposal for the new development in East Side. 40% affordable units, on-site childcare, green spaces." "That's wonderful, Julian." Raya squeezed his hand. "You're making a real difference." Julian looked around the small yard, at the flower beds Raya was creating, the swing set he'd helped assemble for Zion. "So are you." They sat on the patio, drinking their coffee and watching, as Zion returned and tore into his chocolate croissant with the enthusiasm only a 5-year-old could muster. "I have something to show you," Julian said after a while, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "The deed to this place officially transferred into your name. The program paperwork is complete." Raya took the envelope, a lump forming in her throat. "Thank you for making this possible. You did the work," Julian insisted. "I just helped create the opportunity." Raya looked at the man beside her, so different from that first day in the grocery store. Still successful, still wealthy, but changed in fundamental ways, ways that mattered. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "about us." Julian set down his coffee. "Oh? You're here almost every day. You have a toothbrush in my bathroom. Half your clothes are in my closet. Too much?" Julian asked, suddenly uncertain. "No," Raya said, a smile spreading across her face. Not enough, actually. Julian's eyebrows rose. What are you saying? I'm saying, maybe it's time you made it official. Being here, I mean. The hope that dawned on Julian's face was beautiful to behold. Are you asking me to move in with you, Raya Thompson? I am. She held his gaze steadily. Not because I need your help with the mortgage or because it's practical, but because I love waking up next to you, because Zion lights up when you walk through the door, because this place feels most like home when you're in it. Julian's answer was to pull her close and kiss her, right there in the backyard with the spring sun warming their skin and Zion giggling in the background. Is that a yes? Raya asked when they broke apart. That's a yes, Julian confirmed. Though I should warn you, I'm terrible at remembering to take out the trash. Raya laughed. I think we can work around that. Later, as they helped Zion finish planting the flowers, Julian paused, watching the boy carefully pat soil around a small seedling. Zion, he said softly, can I ask you something? Zion looked up, his face smudged with dirt. Uh-huh. How would you feel if I came to live here with you and your mum, all the time, not just visiting? Zion considered this seriously, his small brow furrowed in thought. Would you be here for breakfast too, and to read me stories at night? If that's okay. With you, Julian said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Zion's face broke into a wide smile. Yes, and can we build a tree house in that big tree? You said you built one with your sister when you were little. Julian's eyes grew misty. We absolutely can. Zion threw his arms around Julian in one of his signature hugs. This time, Julian was ready, wrapping the boy in a gentle embrace that spoke of all the love he had to give. Over Zion's head, his eyes met Raya's. In them she saw everything she'd ever wanted. Safety, belonging, family. I think it's time for lemonade, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Who wants to help me make it? Me! Zion broke free from Julian and ran toward the house. Julian stood and took Raya's hand, pulling her close for a moment. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. For what? For letting me in, for giving us a chance. Raya looked up at him, at the man who'd gone from stranger to the love of her life in the space of a few months. Thank Zion, she said with a smile. He saw something in you that day in the grocery store, something worth hugging. Smart kid, Julian murmured. The smartest, Raya agreed. She tugged on his hand. Come on, lemonade awaits. As they walked together toward the house, their house now, Raya marveled at how life could change in an instant. How a child's innocent mistake could lead to finding the missing piece of your heart. How a simple hug could build a bridge between two different worlds, and how love, when it was real, could make those worlds into one. 3 months later, on a warm summer evening, Raya came home from work to find Julian and Zion in the backyard. The treehouse they'd been building together was finally complete. A simple structure nestled in the branches of the maple tree, with a rope ladder and a small platform where a child could sit and dream. Zion was proudly showing it off to Mrs. Patterson, who had become a regular visitor since they'd moved to the neighborhood. Look, Mrs. P, I can see the whole world from up here. Julian stood below, spotting Zion carefully, his face a mix of pride and protectiveness. When he saw Raya, his expression softened into something that still made her heart skip. Hey you, he said, crossing the yard to greet her. How was work? Good, busy. Raya had recently started a new job as office manager at a local community center. Better hours, better pay, and work that felt meaningful. The treehouse looks amazing. We finished it today, Julian said proudly. Zion hammered in the last nail himself. Mr. Julian says it's the best treehouse ever, Zion called down. Even better than the one he made with his sister. Julian's smile turned wistful. Emily would have loved him. She would have loved you too, Raya said softly. The man you've become. Julian's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her close. In the months since he'd moved in, their lives had settled into a rhythm that felt right. Not perfect. They still had disagreements about money, about parenting, about finding balance between their different backgrounds. But they faced those challenges together, with honesty and respect. I have something for you, Julian said, reaching into his pocket. I was going to wait until later, but He pulled out a small box, and Raya's breath caught. "Julian, this isn't how I planned to do this," he said with a nervous laugh. "I had this whole evening set up, dinner reservations, moonlight walk by the river, but standing here watching you come home to us, it just feels right." He opened the box to reveal a ring, not the ostentatious diamond she might have expected from a man of his wealth, but a simple, elegant design that looked exactly like something she would choose for herself. "Raya Thompson," Julian said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You and Zion have given me a home in the truest sense of the word. Will you marry me?" From the treehouse, Zion called down, "Say yes, Mama." "I already did." Raya laughed through her tears. "You asked him first?" Julian nodded. "He's the man of the house. I needed his permission." "And what did he say?" "He said yes, but only if we can get a dog." Raya shook her head, love overwhelming. "Her? Well, I can't argue with that logic." "Is that a yes?" Julian asked, hope written across his face. Raya took his face in her hands. "It's a yes. To you, to us, to everything." As Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, Zion scrambled down from the treehouse and ran to them. Julian lifted him up, and the three of them stood together in an embrace that felt like coming home. "I knew you were special," Zion said to Julian, his small hand patting Julian's cheek. "That's why I hugged you in the store." "That was the luckiest day of my life," Julian replied, his voice thick with emotion, "when a little boy mistook me for someone worth loving." "You are worth loving," Raya whispered. "Every part of you. The sun set over their little yard, casting golden light through the leaves of the maple tree. Raya thought about the journey that had brought them here. How fear had almost kept her from this happiness. How pride had almost cost her this love. But in the end, it was Zion's simple wisdom that had shown them the way. His ability to see past appearances, past differences, to the heart of what mattered. The hug that had found them, that had brought them home. The end.